Before we dive into this video, full disclosure, Google was nice enough to provide me this device for my honest thoughts and feedback. This review was made possible through the Gift from Google campaign. With that said, this is my review of the Google Pixel 6 Pro about 6 weeks later. Alright, so you've been looking at the Pixel 6 Pro and are probably considering it as an upgrade to your current smartphone or, a replacement to something. Hopefully I can give you a good amount of information in this video for you to consider in your purchasing decision. I want to get my one and only criticism out of the way first. The Pixel 6 Pro is a rather large device, almost unwieldy at times, and it is hard for me to recommend to those of you out there that are not into big devices. It is definitely a two-handed device for folks that have medium to small size hands. The display is beautifully large, but the size of this device is the only thing that would keep me from purchasing it myself. If you like big phones, you'll love this thing, but if you're coming from the Pixel 5, you're definitely going to need to make some adjustments in the way that you use your phone. Personally, it's just too big for my skinny jeans and is the only reason I would hesitate on purchasing this smartphone myself. This large phone is a big deal for Google. I think it's their first real attempt at making a high-end flagship phone that stacks up in every way against what Apple and Samsung are putting to the market. This and the Pixel 6 are the first phones with Google's new custom Tensor processor, which powers their artificial intelligence and machine learning processes on device. Google has finally updated the camera sensors after using the same sensor setup for many years in older Pixel devices. I was waiting for this for so long and Google did not disappoint. The best part about this awesome device is that the Pixel 6 Pro starts at and debuted at $900. It comes with 128 gigs of storage, and with some of the efficiencies realized in Android 12, roughly 112 to 113 gigabytes of that is usable, and it has 12 gigabytes of RAM. As for connectivity, the 6 Pro supports both sub-6 and millimeter wave 5G. I haven't been able to test this stuff because with the area that I'm in, I'm under the impression that 5G just isn't ready. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The Pixel 6 Pro is also available in white, black, or a yellowish gold. I have black in this video. There's a new 4x telephoto camera alongside a wide and an ultra wide camera that are both fantastic for photography. The 6.7-inch screen with variable refresh rate for up to 120 Hz gives you a lot of room to play around in. The Pixel 6 Pro reintroduces curved sides to the display, which I'm not too sure about just yet, even after the month and a half that I've been using it. I've gotten really used to flat displays, and this curve just makes it difficult for me to find a good screen protector and a case. Be careful with it. I've seen some other users post photos and videos of the aftermath of what happens if you drop this device and it hits on one of the edges of this curved display. From what I've seen, it's almost a guarantee that your display is toast, even with Gorilla Glass Victus on this device. So you're probably wondering how this so-called Pro Pixel performs. The short answer is that it is very, very good, with the consideration of its starting price point. From my use, there is little to nothing for me to complain about in my month and a half of use of this device as my secondary. I didn't use it as my primary because, it's kind of difficult for me as a part-time reviewer to access and have a secondary line that I don't really use. With all the work and stuff, I hope you understand that this thing was primarily used as my secondary device. And that's just the way it is. The screen on this thing is beautiful and provides a fully immersive experience with its sheer size and its really punchy color replication. It's definitely bright enough to easily see in direct sunlight. The sheer size of this thing and the faster refresh rates make the interface smooth and pleasant to use and interacting with this device. I will say that I did notice a bit of color shifting when you tilt the device on an extreme angle, but that's not much of a concern to me. The other thing that I noticed with the reintroduction of the curved edges on this display is that there's a pretty significant shadowing effect that occurs under bright screen areas with, white backgrounds. Again, you have to actively be looking for these things, and it's just not enough for me to take my attention away from the huge 6.7-inch 19.5 by 9 aspect ratio QHD plus 1440 by 3120 OLED display that offers 512 ppi. It's just a beautiful display. As far as processor performance, this thing isn't going to win any benchmarking awards, but that doesn't really matter in everyday usage in my opinion. One thing you will notice is how much faster and how much more responsive it feels over the Pixel 5. Google's implementation and introduction of the Tensor chip has really added a lift to the device, and it contributes to its awesome battery life. One thing with that though, if you have always show the time info enabled in settings, the standby battery life takes a huge hit. It's nice to have always on display, but it took too much of my battery throughout the day for me to leave it enabled. I've grown accustomed to, clicking or pushing the power button or tapping the screen on my devices over time anyway, so it wasn't a big deal for me to turn that off. It was nice to have it on when it was on, but it was too much of a sacrifice for me to keep it on to my battery. I also noticed that I was taking a hit to the battery life with the smooth display setting. This is a setting where the Pixel 6 Pro automatically raises the refresh rate from 60 to 120 Hertz for some of the content that is, available or enabled with it. If you turn this off as well, your Pixel 6 Pro will easily get you through a heavy day's usage. With these two settings disabled, I consistently would get to bed at night with 20 to 25% left after heavily using this device. If I was using the Pixel 6 Pro regularly, watching videos here and there, scrolling Twitter, hitting Instagram, Facebook, doing some banking or something like that, the 4,905 milliamp hour battery would easily get me to bed or leave me with 30 to 35% easily. The battery on this thing is awesome. One final note on the power of the Pixel 6 Pro, I'm glad they continue to give us wireless charging, and not only did they give us wireless charging, they gave us wireless fast charging. And since they gave us that, they have followed in other manufacturers' footsteps of not including the wall charger in the box. You'll have to bring your own. I don't like that, but it is what it is. Something that matters a lot to me is that they've got really nice haptics. Bad, buzzy haptics that kind of feel sloppy within a device just ruin an experience on a phone for me overall. But Google nailed it within the Pixel 6 Pro. They're soft and clicky with just the right amount of feedback to you in the haptics engine on the Pixel 6 Pro. I'm really impressed by how well this is built and how well it is implemented. It feels natural. So the next thing that I want to talk about that is an item of contention across the board with the Pixel 6 and Pixel 6 Pro is its under-screen fingerprint sensor. In my experience and usage, it has been a minor annoyance up until the recent system update. It was relatively accurate often than not, but when it didn't work, it would go off the deep end and fail out to where I would have to enter my PIN. One thing with it though is that you have to keep your finger in place and hold it there. And that's probably, if you're coming from iPhone and you're used to the instantaneous response of, Touch ID per se, this is gonna take a little bit of getting used to. But when you do, it's really not that big of a deal. I don't know why everybody's up in arms over it. I didn't keep a running log of when it failed prior to the update, but if I had to put a number to it and make a guess, I'd say it was about 80 to 90% accurate before this last update. With the update, the sensor's responsiveness has aggressively improved. This shows that Google is listening to us as consumers and users of their devices and making rather quick improvements to their device. As expected, the Pixel 6 Pro runs Google's latest and greatest version of Android. The completely redesigned Android 12 experience is, how do I put this? Good, but it's not something that I personally like. I do really dislike the round settings icons from the pull-down menu. I also don't like the wallpaper and style options that Google has given us. There's now a requirement to add a hint of color to those settings and icons. I don't like looking at that. But the good thing about this is, it's Android, so you can customize it however you would like by just adding a launcher on top of it, and that gets rid of all of it. So in reality, it's really a non-issue because Android 12 is pretty freaking awesome. Even with those minor annoyances, Android just keeps getting better, and if I wasn't married to Mac OS, I would seriously consider switching back to Android full-time. It's super fast. Pair this with the 120 Hertz display and sped up animations into developer options, you have yourself a stunningly responsive and fast smartphone. In comparison with a much more expensive device, but what some would consider a direct competitor to the Pixel 6 Pro, I've noticed my iPhone 13 Pro's ProMotion display is more jittery in some instances, especially with the Gmail app on iOS. Maybe it's an app optimization thing or something going on there, or Google sabotaging that experience, I don't know. But Gmail on the Pixel 6 Pro is much more fluid and much more responsive, and it's just a way better experience than it is on iOS. The last thing to note with the Pixel 6 and the 6 Pro's Android updates is that Google says it will support them for up to 5 years with security updates, which is a lot longer than any typical Android phone gets from other manufacturers. So with that, they're not promising, a significant overhaul of updates to come to the device. They're just saying that you'll be protected with security updates. And again, it's not that they're going to provide you with Android version updates to this device. It's just Google's commitment to your security on your device, but they will give you 3 years of operating system upgrades. All right, let's get into these new cameras. Google has finally put new sensors inside of the Pixel, and I'm really happy that they did. It's finally time they put forth some new hardware within the Pixel lineup and their cameras. The main camera on this thing is a giant 50 megapixel sensor that has been designed within the software to produce 12.5 megapixel images. The main camera delivers an f1.85 aperture lens and has optical image stabilization built in. Right next to that is a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens that gives you 114 degrees field of view and an f2.2 lens. And finally, there's a new 4x telephoto f3.5 48 megapixel camera that gives you 12 megapixel images as well, which also has optical image stabilization on this sensor. The photos I get from this device are just absolutely, positively amazing, and they're really impressive. You will not be disappointed with the images that you pull off the Pixel 6 Pro. The Pixel 6 Pro's video has gotten a lot better than older Pixels, but it's still off when you consider its competition. Processing, image stabilization, and frame rate availability are just not there. Good news is that you can easily record 4K 60 frames per second video as long as you want without it overheating. I ran it for a while and no issues, even bouncing it around and recording things and all that image processing and grabbing all those frames and putting it on device. The phone got warm, but it never got hot. But as an item of frustration for me, I still cannot record 24 frames per second using the default camera app. I just don't understand this decision by Google and why do they keep doing this? They're just not giving us the option. You may be asking why this is such a concern to me. In a nutshell, 24 frames per second is the standard for movies and TV shows, and it's essentially the frame rate that is used for cinematic projects that help in portraying a realistic motion in the video that you shoot. In my mind, the Google Pixel, the whole line of it, is driven towards creatives, and I think creatives would want to shoot cinematic video. Am I wrong? Leave me a comment down below telling me that I'm wrong and why do I keep bringing this up. But every single pixel that I get within the default camera app, I cannot record 24 frames per second. I just don't understand why. And it's just something you can't do on this Pixel 6 Pro either, or any of the Pixels lineup, like at all, which is just so weird to me. I don't understand it. Ultimately, if Google would just unlock all of the frame rate of capabilities of the sensor within the the default camera app, I would stop complaining about this. But every year, every Pixel, I go in and I'm disappointed because there's no 24 frames per second. Anyways, I'm gonna get off my soapbox now and we're gonna move on. Not to be ignored, the front-facing camera on the 6 Pro is 11 megapixels and has a really nice field of view. It gives you night sight, motion, portrait, regular options, and additional modes with a 1.4 times option to zoom, and also has 4K video availability on the front-facing camera, which is a nice addition if I do say so myself. Okay, here's a sample of the front-facing camera on the Google Pixel 6 Pro in a pretty harsh environment because you can see the snow and all that type of stuff, but it does a good job like rendering in that dynamic range. And this has speech enhancement as well. That's one thing that I forgot to mention while I was talking to you about the review. And that helps with focusing in on your voice. I will do another sample with that turned off and just see if it does or makes any difference. But I really like the camera's capability, especially on the front-facing camera, of it bringing in all that detail on the clouds. Any other like camera, phone, or smartphone, especially the front-facing one, would lose all of those cloud details, especially in such a harsh kind of background. You can see it does a really good job at exposing my face and bringing in all the detail from the background. I'll go ahead and face it almost directly at the sun, and it's still holding my face really well. So from this sample, I really think it does a good job. I just wish they would give me 24 frames per second. Let's go ahead and hop over to a front-facing camera without this speech enhancement to see the difference really quick before we do a rear-facing camera sample. So here's the front-facing camera without speech enhancement enabled. You let me know what you think of between the differences. I think this would have a better effect or sound much more different from the previous sample if I was in a louder environment, but here I am just in my backyard kind of providing you some samples with the dynamic range because I thought it would be an awesome opportunity to do so. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. This is the rear-facing camera on the Google Pixel 6 Pro. You can see that it does a really good job at exposing me and maintaining all of the detail on the super bright overexposed background here. You can see all the detail right here and on this side, and I'll move over here. I mean, the camera is literally facing directly into the sun. If I go over here, I'm still properly exposed. Google's doing a really good job at like managing images and having all that stuff within the camera phone. I just wish they would give us 24 frames per second. The audio on this is also really nice. It doesn't have like the focused audio that you would get from the front-facing camera, but I mean, with that said, I mean, this does a good job at recording. There's a bunch of different features as well. So there's a heavy movement, there's a silent pan, there's all kinds of stuff within the camera app that they provide that does automatic things to your video. And that's good if you want to have that. I just wish they would give us a little bit more granular control over the camera app. I mean, there are, you know, secondary or third-party apps out there. Anyways, let me know what you think of this sample on the rear-facing camera of the Google Pixel 6 Pro with a comment down below. Before we move on, I want to make an honorable mention to this neat little feature Google has dubbed Magic Eraser. It's an option that lets you remove distracting items or people from your photos that you just don't want there. Say you were taking a picture and there's some weirdo in the background, you can quickly erase them. Pretty soon you're not gonna need Photoshop or any professional photographers out there, and the phone's just gonna do it all and you won't need to hire them. I'm just kidding. It's a fun party trick, but it can be really finicky at times. And when it's finicky, it's aggravating, but when it works, it's awesome and it's cool. There's a whole lot to this Pixel 6 Pro. It's an excellent device that I had to spend a little bit more time with to get to know before I gave you this review. It's among one of the best phones that you can buy right now. And if your budget is a deciding factor of what the best phone it is you can buy, this is the phone, period. For $900, you get one of the best devices available to us right now. The only showstopper for me would be its sheer size. It's a ginormatron. That's something that I can't personally get over. It's huge, and I just wish Google would have made a true successor to the Pixel 5, because that device is by far my favorite size of device. It is the perfect size for what I would consider to be my daily driver. Specs aren't everything when you don't enjoy handling the device, and that's just my opinion. If it's the fastest device on the planet and you can edit Photoshop files on it and put some 8K Cinema Raw on there and, you know, export in 2 seconds, and it's just the best phone ever, but it's too big and I don't enjoy handling it, it's not the best device there is. It's just the way I look at it. But for those of you out there that don't mind a larger device, the Pixel 6 Pro is definitely worth your consideration when you're looking at upgrading or buying a new smartphone. Before I close, I must disclose Google was kind enough to provide me this device as a part of the Gift from Google campaign. Without them, this video would not have been possible, and without you, my recognition from Google would not have been possible, so a huge thank you to you. If you're interested in pricing and availability, it will be linked in the description. Full disclosure, some of those links down there are my affiliate links, so purchases made through those links provide me a little bit of commission based on your purchases without costing you anything in addition. So if you shop or do anything through my links, it is highly appreciated. Thank you. It supports content creation here on this channel. Well, that about does it for me in this one. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, you know what to do. Thank you for taking the time to watch. I'm Tomas, and I will catch you in the next one.